It is such an honor today to have Ken Moskowitz on the podcast. Ken is a seasoned creative professional with nearly 4 decades of experience in the creative industry. He has led rebranding and revival efforts for major brands such as the Indy 500, Frito-Lay, Samuel Adams, Coca-Cola, M&M Mars, the NBA, NFL, MLB, and ESPN Sports. In late 2022, he wrote his 100,000th ad and has generated over $40 billion in sales revenue. With 5 children and a multitasking wife, Ken has honed his ability to juggle multiple tasks and bring divergent creative solutions to the table. His unique approach to advertising is edgy and memorable, setting him apart in the industry. And that's why today he coaches some of the advertising industry's largest copywriting teams, creative writers for small brands, and entrepreneurs in growth mode. He is a sought-after speaker for industry conferences like Social Media Marketing World, private masterminds, and corporate growth events, which is where he and I got to meet, and I got exposed to Ken. Ken, I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for being on the show.
I'm glad I'm here. You know, I feel like I just saw you a few days ago.
Just a handful of moments, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
And here we are.
You can thank Pedro for bringing us
here. At Pedro's Pizza, the best in Dallas. So I hear.
Inside joke.
That's right.
No, we're not going to let you in on the joke. Sorry.
That's just for us.
Googling.
That's right.
Pedro's
Pizza in Dallas. That's right. Oh my goodness, man. Every time we get together, I laugh. And that is, I think, part of the joy that you bring to the conversation.
Welcome to Catalytic Leadership, the podcast designed to help leaders intentionally grow and thrive. Here is your host, author and leadership and executive coach, Dr. William Attaway.
I want to start with some of your story. Sure. I'd love for you to share just a little bit of your story with our listeners, particularly around your journey and your development as a leader. How did you get started on this journey?
You know, I got to say, I was a disappointment to my family. And when I say that, I mean it sincerely. I was the black sheep of this New York Jewish family because I chose not to go down the path of doctor, lawyer, dentist, right? You know, you think about all the things that my people, and that's what I use the terms my people, typically look at. And I went down this weird path of I wanted to be in advertising. I wanted to be in, making ads. And of course, my parents, my family were like, you can't make a living doing that. But as a kid, I was a weirdo. While my friends and family were out going to the beach on the weekends, Rockaway Beach, Jones Beach. If you're from New York, shout out. You know what I'm talking about. Christopher Morley Park. I would rather have spent time in my bedroom listening to and recording the radio. And I was recording the radio not because I wanted to hear the songs. I was recording the radio because I loved the ads. I was fascinated by advertising as a kid. Again, every kid's got their weird thing, right? Some are into Matchbox cars, some collect stamps or coins, others every kid's got their little hobby. For me, it was listening to, recording, and analyzing. I didn't realize it at the time, advertising. And so I would listen to these radio ads, which then were 60 seconds long, which today is an eternity for an ad. And I would look at why these ads were so effective. And I started to recognize at an early age that in 60 seconds, the man or woman speaking could emotionally move someone to want something, to have a desire, to take action. And I'm like, that's fascinating. Now, of course, at that point in my life, I was a kid. I didn't think about the psychology of it. I just thought it was really cool that the person on the radio could get someone to do things. And so I really studied advertising from a very, very early age. And that was my jam. That was always my thing. And what I started doing is, and this is a little probably more detailed than you want, but I started recording these ads and then figuring out what about them made them work. And then I started making my own ads. And I was recording my own advertising for nothing. Like I wasn't writing ads for a client. I was 12 years old. Okay. But I was making ads in my bedroom and recording them. And then I would make ads for friends and make ads for their fictitious lemonades, or not their fictitious, their lemonade stand or their whatever it is that they did. And then my first break, and it's funny, when I wrote my book, I didn't think about my first real break where I was paid to write an ad. And I was still just a kid. Buddy's Schwinn Bike Shop on Casino Boulevard in Flushing, Queens. For those of you who grew up there or know the area, I don't think Buddy's is there anymore, but he was running an ad for his bike shop in one of those free local newspapers. It wasn't the New York Post or the New York Daily News or the Times. It was one of those like neighborhood, like penny savers.
Yeah.
And he said to me, he's like, "Hey, Moskowitz, you're pretty good at words. Can you help me figure something out?" So I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." So I did the first ad for him, and it was a freebie. The ad was really successful for him. And so then he did a paid ad in, I think it was the New York Post, because the Post had, or the Daily News had, these localized editions for Queens, Brooklyn, the Bronx. So I wrote the ad for him, and he paid me in bicycle supplies.
Nice.
And so that was my first paid ad, was doing an ad for Buddy's Schwinn Bike Shop in Queens. And so I just was a nerd from a very early age. Like, I realize now at getting close to 60, that my path was carved very early in life, and I never veered from that path. And I still don't. I love what I do. It's fun for me. It's a game for me. And every time I see advertising that's poorly done or ineffective, or they missed an opportunity to really just punch, it kills me, because this is what I eat, breathe, and sleep.
Wow. You know, we talked a little bit about this the first time we met. My dad started an ad agency back in the 70s, and I grew up in that world, watching through traditional advertising way before there was digital,
Right.
and watching him wrestle through exactly what you're describing, right? How to do the hook, how to hit the pain point, like how to dissect things. But I've never heard anybody put it like that, particularly from such a young age. 12 years old, and you're dissecting ads from the radio, figuring out what works and what doesn't.
And William, you know, it's really interesting. So part of my childhood and part of this journey into advertising, I really have to thank a man that I despised as a child. So I've got to give you a little backstory on this. So my nickname, Spanky, is a nickname that I hated as a kid. I was 4 years old. It was Rosh Hashanah. Everybody was at my grandmother's house for the Jewish New Year. And my uncle Jaime Kulinski, does not get any more Jewish than that, came over and slapped a propeller beanie on my head and took a picture and captioned it, because I was a pudgy kid and I looked like Spanky from the Little Rascals.
Yeah.
I was 4 when that happened. The next year I started school, and that picture hung in my parents' house, my grandparents' house. Needless to say, all my friends started calling me Spanky. I hated it. As a child, I hated that nickname. Now, fast forward. I'm 13 years old and I am bar mitzvahed. I did what I'm supposed to do, and I had my bar mitzvah, and we were at, I think it was called Lions Gate or Gate of Lions. I forget where the reception was, but I'm walking into the restroom. The story is going to get a little weird and personal. And right behind me, Uncle High walks in. And Uncle High was a formidable guy. He wasn't huge, but he was like a stocky, beefy dude. And Uncle High walks up to me and he goes, "Shh." And he takes this envelope and he opens up my jacket. And you know, the inside pocket of a jacket? He puts the envelope in my jacket and he goes, "Shh. Your parents know about the gift out there. This is for you. Shh." And I walked out of the bathroom. He's like a mobster, right? Well, what my parents didn't know at the time, they know now. Uncle High gave me a lot of extra cash that was not in the gift check that was on the, you know, where all the gifts were. He just wanted to do something nice for me. It was Uncle High who funded my first professional recording equipment set up in my bedroom. And it was at the age of 13 because he had given me enough money for me to buy 2 turntables, a complete mixing board, recording equipment, a reel-to-reel, cassette recorders, microphone. I mean, he hooked me up. Also, back then,
Wow.
prices were low. Okay, so and between the Whiz and Crazy Eddie's, I was in business, and so I had all of the equipment thanks to Uncle High,
Wow.
but I still hated the nickname.
Yeah.
And when he died, of course, as a kid, I could not rationalize this. I thought, oh, thank God, my nickname is finally going to stop. Not associating the fact that like Uncle High had nothing to do with the nickname carrying on. It was just at that point, it was cemented in my DNA.
Yeah.
But I will thank Uncle High to this day for giving me that cursed nickname when I was 4. And that's because in the advertising industry, everyone calls me Spanky. No one remembers Ken. They never forget Spanky. Gary V calls me Spanky. Like literally, he does not call me Ken. The people I know at name the company, they call me Spanky.
Wow.
And so he blessed me with a nickname I didn't understand was a blessing as a child, because in the creative field, when someone has a problem, they're like, call Spanky. He's the guy to fix your message. And so it was a blessing and a curse, but first it was a curse. And I know I went probably way deeper on that than I needed to, but I thought the context
No.
of that might have been, for someone who's
Well,
going through therapy,
That's right. Yeah. Well, I think it illustrates that there's no such thing as a wasted experience in our
No,
lives.
there isn't. There isn't.
Everything we go through is part of what makes us who we are. What we encounter that we think is fantastic, and what we encounter that we think is a curse, like you're saying. But how that has turned and what has become. I mean, 100,000 ads,
It's insane.
and not just any ads. I mean, you've got some Super Bowl ads.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot. Like when I think about where I started and what I've done, I don't sit there and go, "Oh wow, I've done these things." It's just what I do. And
Yeah.
so it's just part of my normal day to day. I mean, but I love what I do so much, and I love the fact that I've written stuff for every NFL team. Like that to me it's not a badge of honor. It's cool.
Yeah.
And the fact that this nerdy ad kid, which I still feel like I'm a nerdy ad kid I'm 57. Okay. I'll be 58 in the spring. I still feel like I'm a nerdy 12-year-old ad kid. And,
Wow.
and that's to me, and I always look at opportunities to fix messaging. And so when I see something that's busted, I to this day, I reach out to companies and I will say, "Hey, I saw this message and I had an idea. Here you go." And
Wow.
I'll literally send them something, and that starts conversations and has landed me quite a few clients over the years, because I don't do it with the intent of grabbing their business. I do it with the intent of, like, your message sucked. Let me fix it.
Right. Well, you lead with generosity.
Yeah, I do. It's just it's in my DNA, because I want to make advertising awesome. And the only way to make advertising awesome is to fix things that suck. And when I see an opportunity, I take it and I fix it.
So let me dial this in for just a second, because you've come across this a couple of times, how much you enjoy what you do, the joy that you bring to it.
Yeah.
Has that always been the case, or have there been moments where it has been a little bit more of a drudgery? How do you keep that fire burning?
William, I'll tell you where the drudgery comes in is when I get out of the lane of creative and I go into the lane of operational, or I go into the lane of being the doer rather than the creator.
That's good.
When I get into doer mode, it's dangerous, because I lose my drive, I lose my desire, I lose my interest. I have shiny object syndrome, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs do, but as a creative, so forget the entrepreneur side. As a creative, I have really shiny object syndrome. Like, it's horrible. Thank God for Vyvanse. It's truly that. It's so funny, and I'm not advocating everybody take medicines for ADD, but my wife for 25 years tried to convince me to take something. And finally that wall got broken down and I'm like, all right, I'm going to try it as long as I don't lose my creative edge.
Yeah.
And when I started taking it, I'm like, oh my gosh, the noise is gone. And my creativity went even higher because now I'm not dealing with the distractions of all the shiny things.
That's
But
amazing.
for me, when I get out of the space of creative and I get into the space of doing things or becoming the implementer or the integrate, that is the death of me. So for me, the best place is in those chairs behind me, letting my brain cook up new ideas, at the smart board, jotting things down. And the lighting in my room is different. By the way, that's a big thing for me. When I'm in creator mode, and a lot of people don't do this, and I want to talk to you, especially if you're like in the agency space or in the marketing space. I really, when you're in the creator mode or creative mode, you've got to step away from these things, these computers and screens and devices. They don't bring out your best creative. They suck you down a rabbit hole of distraction. And so when I'm in creator mode, here, I'm going to go grab it. And this is where creativity happens. It's the written word in my notebooks. This is where I write all of my ads. This is where everything happens. But if you'll notice, it's not here at my desk. It's back there in my creative corner. Why do I have a creative corner? It's because I can shut off my screens. I turn off the overhead lights that I'm using right now so that you can see me. I have atmospheric lighting in the corner. I have atmospheric lighting over there. And I get into a Zen space because creativity requires that. Creativity requires quiet. It requires contemplative time. It requires sometimes white noise. I want you to look, and I'm not just speaking to you, William, I'm speaking to everybody who's listening to your podcast. I want you to look at the times in your life and the times in your day when you have the most creative thoughts. And everybody says, oh, I had the best thought when I was in the shower. There's a reason for that. You don't have any distractions and you have white noise and you have nothing but your thoughts and create. And so when that happens, all of these subconscious things that are buried in the back of your head get to bubble up and you're like, oh my God, I have the greatest idea ever. Right? That doesn't happen when you're sitting in front of 3 screens. Like right now, I'm sitting in front of 3 screens. I've got Perplexity open here, my calendar open here, you're here, right? This is not a creative inducing environment.
Yeah.
That is. And so you've got to separate yourself from the technology that you work with on a daily basis to create.
That is incredibly valuable. As I'm thinking about this, I often tell leaders that creativity lives in margin. And if you don't have margin in your life, this is likely why you think, well, I'm not very creative. It's because your pace is wrong. Your rhythm is wrong. And I love how you just described that. But particularly around the physical environment, I believe environments matter. And what you just described, the lighting, the seating, the notebook, like that is incredibly intentional on your part in creating this. And I bet you didn't start knowing all that, but that over time, right, you learned.
When I was before I left the corporate world, so here's what my lighting would be like if I didn't have these overhead blasters on. Hold on. Come on, camera, follow me. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so you can see right there by my grandfather's flag. So this is his flag. He was a World War II vet. And come on, camera, right over here. There you go. And then back in the corner, there's a light. And then on this wall, there's LED lighting that gives me accuracy. So yes, very intentional. Now, probably going to make all your listeners and viewers seasick, but that's okay. But here's the thing. It didn't start that way. But over the years, I evolved to that. And so when I left my corporate job, when I left the corporate creative world, it was interesting. So I had my own space, my own office, my own creative haven. Everybody called it the cave. I never had the overhead lights on. I had candlelight. I had atmospheric lighting in different parts of the room. I had comfortable chairs. I literally recreated what I had in the corporate world in my company, in my office. And And I've done that because I realize over time, the silence, the serenity, is the thing that gives me the best creative edge and allows me to outperform and outcreate anybody. And I just know that. And that's a little bit arrogant, but the truth is I'm not afraid of competition because I'm better than they are. And I'm better than they are because I've studied the craft. I live the craft. I eat, breathe, and sleep the craft. And it's not work to me.
You have the mind of a perpetual student.
I do.
And every time I've heard you talk, it comes through so loud and clear. You are constantly learning, watching, listening, and growing. Has that always been the case? Or was there a moment where you learned the value of that mindset?
You know, honestly, it wasn't always the case. First of all, like I think many entrepreneurs, I was a terrible student. I hated school. I was not open to learning when I was a kid. In fact, I'm also cursed with something. I have a photographic memory. So school was very boring for me because I only needed to be taught something once to retain it. And, you know, my family recognized it, you know, when we would go someplace, and back then there were no Google Maps and we would use a map to get there. But the next time we went there, I'm like, I don't need the map. I can tell you how to get there. Well, how do you know? We were only there once. Because I have a photographic memory. Like, I didn't know at the time that's what it was. I just knew that I could remember everything, details. So school was a challenge for me because of that. I was bored. So I acted out. And I didn't recognize the value of education. But over time I did. And over time I realized that if I liked something, I would dive deep into it. And so the education was always about stuff that fascinated me, that interested me, that fed my brain. It's why, like my wife and I, we don't ever watch TV together, ever. Because the stuff that she likes and the stuff that I like are vastly different. Like I have been watching this Nova series on planets and climates and planets. Why? Because it's interesting to me. And it expands my knowledge of just stuff in the world or stuff in the universe. I have a very inquisitive mind, but it's only for the things that I'm interested in. If you tried to teach me about auto repair, I would like that's the end of me. Like, I just don't care. And so I think that if you look at the way schools are structured in the US, I think schools really need an overhaul because we teach our kids things today. Well, we've taught them since I was a kid. Rote memorization is kind of useless now. We don't need rote memorization. We need practical living skills, and we need practical ability to make critical decisions. And rote memorization is kind of useless. I can go to Perplexity. I can go to Google. There are tools now that can get. I don't need to know the names of all of Columbus's boats, although I know they were the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria, because it was drilled into my head.
That's right.
Right? I don't need to know the name of Columbus's boats. By the way, they just found out he was an Italian Jew. That's a game changer. Hey,
I didn't know that.
Because I follow things and learn things.
Look at that.
So I want to know how he dealt with the whole salami and Genoa, because that's not kosher. But you know, neither was the sausage pizza from Pedro.
This is true. This is true.
Anyway, but rote memorization, I don't think is a valuable tool anymore. And I think teaching kids stuff that has value in life is far more important. Now, I'm not here to fix the education system. I'm here to talk about what we do in the advertising world and, you know, in my world. But I think that kids will learn more when you give them stuff that's interesting to learn.
I think different kids are wired differently. They bend different ways.
Of course.
You know, we homeschooled both of our daughters. right? My older one graduates college in about 6 months from now as we
Mm-hmm.
record this. And one of the things that we were able to do with both of them is craft their educational experience around how they are wired, around how they're bent. My older one is more wired with words. You know, if you're familiar with the PBS cartoon Word Girl, she's Word Girl. You know, she was always vocabulary, with always just like she eats dictionaries.
Mm-hmm.
Like what on earth? She wants to go into publishing and editing. This is what she wants to do,
Okay.
right? That's where and we were able to craft an educational experience around that. But like you say, going into a public education system, that would be much more difficult because
Yeah.
everything has to be rote. It has to be according to a certain template.
Right.
I think what you're describing for your bend is when you found something that really lit your fire, you dove deep
Yeah.
and you became world class at it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's why I studied, when I was a kid. So I had to go to the Jamaica Library in Jamaica, Queens, because if I wanted to read anything, you went to the library.
Sure.
We didn't have Google. We didn't have books, audiobook. We had books. We didn't have audiobooks, and books were
Yeah.
expensive,
Yes, they were.
and I studied advertising and David Ogilvy. And I read, I was reading advertising periodicals when I was a kid. Weird. I'm just weird. But it was the thing that that was my jam. And so I remember my English teacher. So Harriet Prado, I wrote a blog about her a few years ago, and she is retired now, lives in Arizona. I still have to go see her. She was the only teacher that saw the creativity in me and encouraged it. And she was an English teacher. And so she always encouraged my creative writing, my storytelling, the thing that other teachers hated about me, my creativity, was the thing she embraced. And so
Wow.
Harriet Prado is directly responsible for a portion of who I am today.
And there again, we go into no wasted experience and the impact you can make on any life if you choose to do so. The impact she made on you, the ripples have continued. I love
Yeah.
that. Ken, as you think about your journey and you think about as you have grown and developed, not just as a marketer and a creative, but leading the people that you work with, leading your team, they need you to lead at a different level today than they did 5 years ago. And 5 years from now, they're going to need you to lead at an even higher level. How do you continue to develop the skills that your business and your team are going to need you to have?
So let me start with a real clear fact. I am an awful leader. I'm a terrible leader. And the reason I'm a terrible leader isn't because I don't love people. I love people. In
Yeah.
fact, I struggled for a year. I had to fire somebody a few years ago. I struggled for a year with that decision. And it was
Oh
an
my goodness.
email. It was an email between, and I don't know how Gary V comes back into this again. I sent Gary an email on a Saturday morning, and I'm like, I have to fire this person, Gary. And I've been struggling with it. And 5 minutes later, I got an email back from him. Empathy, kindness, and a really good severance package. And I'm like, oh, yeah, but it's still painful. I'm not a good people leader. And the reason I'm not a good people leader is because my head is in the clouds of creative. And I don't like the managing of people because I hated being managed.
Right.
So what I do is I work with adults who manage themselves and manage themselves well, and they're trusted to manage themselves well. And the number of times that we have issues, I can count on one hand because
Wow.
people are adults. And if you give people the space and the latitude to do what they do best, you don't need to manage them. I have one member of my team, Katie. And if Katie hears this, she'll know that I'm sharing the love. She will CC me on an important client email, not because she wants me to respond. She just wants to keep me in the loop. And if she needs me for anything, she'll Marco Polo me and say, hey, I CC'd you on that email. Here's why, blah, 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 blah. And that's it. And so at the end of the day, when you hire adults and you give them the autonomy to do what they were hired to do and do their job, and you respect them and you love them and you treat them well and you take them out for lunches and you appreciate them and you listen to their stories and their hardships and you're there, and we have another member, and I won't bring her name up because of some privacy stuff, but she was going through some really tough stuff with one of her kids. And that was a challenging time. And then right after that, she got sick and had to deal with challenge on top of challenge. And so you have to be able to take off the boss hat and put on just the human hat and go, hey, if this were me, how would I want to be treated? How would I want this situation dealt with? And I really look at what I went through from May of 2023 until April of 2024 as a prime example of how that turns 360 degrees or 180 degrees back towards me. I got diagnosed with stage 3 rectal cancer, and I was offline for a year. When I say offline for a year, William, I didn't work. I didn't work. I wasn't really answering emails. I wasn't involved in the day-to-day of business. I was surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, 2 more surgeries. That was a year of my life. But nobody needed to be micromanaged. Everybody did their jobs. Everybody got paid. The business survived. I survived. And it's because you bring in people that know how to manage themselves, that know how to do what they do. And I think that's I think a lot of business owners want to be puppeteers because they like to control. And I'm a control freak. I am a total control freak. But I also recognize that you can't control people. You have to just let them do what they do naturally. And so if you hire creatives to do a creative job, let them create. And if you hire accounting people to do accounting stuff, let them account, right? You've got to put people in their seats, let them do what they do in those seats, and trust that at the end of the day, they're doing the best job because people want to do a good job naturally.
Yeah. And I'm going to contradict you there.
Okay.
You say you're not a great leader. And I just want to call out what you just described is one of the best models of leadership I've heard in all the conversations I've had.
I'm a great leader, William. I was going to say it from the start.
That's right.
I mean, because you're best.
You're leading with the other person in mind. You're leading thinking about them. And I think that's great leadership. Leadership is not about you. Leadership is about the people that you serve, the people that you get to lead. That's leadership. That's real leadership. And that's what I just heard. So I just want to call that out. And I think that is a model that a whole lot of people can learn from and understand that when you see people not just as cogs in the machine of your business, but when you see them as actual 3D human beings and you begin to treat them that way and talk to them that way and care for them as a human, I think you lead at a different level.
Okay. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. As you continue to learn and grow, you are always in that mode now. And I'm curious, is there a book that has made a big difference in your journey that you would recommend? If the leaders who are listening haven't read it, you got to check this one out.
So it's not necessarily about leadership.
That's okay.
It's about the basic principles of marketing. And so my book that I wrote, and this is not about my book. This is the foundational book that inspired my book. My book that I wrote was based off of Gary Vaynerchuk's jab, 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 right hook, which is give, ask. And which is really the basis of how I operate today. When I see a bad ad, I make a new one, I send it to the company. I do a quick introduction, like, you don't know me from a hole in the wall, but I saw this and it was driving me nuts, so I fixed it. feel free to use it. And if you have any questions, here's how you get in touch with me. That's it. Like, that's how I continue to build business is I give, then I ask. And so Gary V's Jab, 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 Right Hook is the number one book for me. The second book is his follow-up to that. So Jab, 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 Right Hook is on loaner right now to a friend of mine. I Am Now the Library. And this is the other one. Day Trading Attention. And this book gives you the practical, everyday, how to do the things to grow and to market and to expand your market share. This book, those two books are, to me, two of the most powerful books when it comes to marketing. And I think everyone should be required reading for anyone who's going into the branding, advertising, or marketing space.
Brilliant. We will have links to those in the show notes as well as yours.
Awesome. Thank you.
Again, I swear I could talk to you for another hour. Like, I so enjoy our conversation.
We need to order a pizza from Pedro's.
I know where to get it. That's right. Okay. He'll be late, but he'll be there.
He'll be late, and the pizza will be soggy, and it will taste nothing like a New York pizza.
That's right. But it's in Dallas, so it's okay.
Well, that explains why it tastes nothing like a New York pizza.
That's right.
It has a twang to it.
Man, I want to thank you for your generosity today in sharing from your story, in sharing from what your experiences have been so far, and sharing some of the insights that you've gained along the way in your leadership journey, in your creative journey, and being so generous with that. I so appreciate that.
Thank you. I know I'm happy to do it. And I'm really grateful to have the opportunity. I mean, we've had conversations several times and never have gone like down into this space, which I love. I want to leave with something to encourage people. And that is this: when you have a creative thought, it doesn't matter what that thought is. It can be dark. It can be dirty. It can be raunchy. It doesn't matter. Don't judge the thought you have. Write it down, because that thought may be the foundation of the most brilliant thing you've ever created. And so often people judge the thoughts they have because they have a moral thing. Like, oh, I shouldn't think that. That's horrible of me. Right?
Yeah.
Don't judge your thoughts. Just write them down. And then at some point you might revisit that thought and go, that was really dark, but boy, this could be really funny off of that. Or this could be a great take on something. Don't judge your thoughts.
Profound and incredibly practical. Thank you, Ken. I know folks are going to want to stay connected to you and continue to learn more about what you do. What's the best way for them to do that?
You know what? Just email me. And my easiest email to remember is ken@adzombies.com. That's ADZOMBIES.com. I will answer your email. I've got 13 other email addresses, but that's the shortest one. So that's the one that's easy. Or you can just, find me on social. It's easy.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thanks for joining me for this episode today. As we wrap up, I'd love for you to do two things. First, subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if you find value here, I'd love it if you would rate it and review it. That really does make a difference in helping other people to discover this podcast. Second, if you don't have a copy of my newest book, Catalytic Leadership, I'd love to put a copy in your hands. If you go to catalyticleadershipbook.com, you can get a copy for free. Just pay the shipping so I can get it to you, and we'll get one right out. My goal is to put this into the hands of as many leaders as possible. This book captures principles that I've learned in 20 plus years of coaching leaders in the entrepreneurial space, in business, government, nonprofits, education, and the local church. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn to keep up with what I'm currently learning and thinking about. And if you're ready to take a next step with a coach to help you intentionally grow and thrive as a leader, I'd be honored to help you. Just go to catalyticleadership.net to book a call with me. Stay tuned for our next episode next week. Until then, as always, leaders, choose to be catalytic.
Thanks for listening to Catalytic Leadership with Dr. William Attaway. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss the next episode. Want more? Go to catalyticleadership.net.